Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. WWE legend Mick Foley is the subject of a brand new documentary tomorrow night on A&E. I spoke with him about his iconic Hell in a Cell match against The Undertaker. Mick, thanks so much for joining us. This is an honor.
Hey, it's a pleasure.
That warm summer's night in the igloo, 1998, Hell in the Cell with Undertaker. You had an ongoing program with Taker with the Boiler Room Brawl and the Buried Alive with the little carry hand sneaking up out of the grave. And take me sort of into how you and Taker had already built a psychology together.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's one really infamous night. Like, I had no idea how important that night was going to turn out to be. And it struck me as an odd choice for me and Taker, because we had kind of been all over the country and the world in 96 and 97, and it was almost like thrown together. Like, I was like, really, you want me? Like a semi-main event, Austin and Kane and the other one. And so it didn't seem to have a ton of build to it. Didn't seem to be the great choice. But we had that chemistry, and that night, kind of fate was either with us or against us. It led to a series of really bizarre, surreal circumstances, and the fact that we kind of lived through it made that night take on a life of its own.
I know Shawn and Taker had done the original Hell in the Cell, one of Taker's favorite matches ever, and Kane came out, all that stuff. But so with that being the bar, such a high bar set, are you and Taker's thinking, hey, we have to top this? Is that why you guys went for that first bump? Because the first one was planned and the second one wasn't.
Yeah, I hate to say planned, but it was thought of. I watched the first one with Terry Funk, and it was just an amazing match. And I was not like an incredibly gifted athlete. I was not a great climber, not a great pull-up guy. Like all the things you need to really excel in that type of match were not my strengths. And I just said, what the heck am I going to do? And then Terry said, I think you ought to start the match on top of the cell. And we just started like brainstorming with these ludicrous ideas, and we're laughing about how impossible they all sounded. And then I just turned to him and I said, I think I could do it.
Yeah.
And so we just had this really, a way of starting a match that had never been done. And, the idea of starting a match that appears to end in 10 seconds.
How important was the Jim Ross call there? As God is my witness, he's broken in half. And then to me, the real goosebump part was you on the stretcher, and oh my God, he's going back up.
Yeah, when I got off that stretcher, and first of all, we didn't know, Jim didn't know what was going down in the match, so he was calling it from the heart. I had no idea what he had said. I remember when I got home from that tour, just laying in bed and watching it over and over. Like, I just could not believe what had taken place, and also that immortal call. With God as my witness, he's been broken in half. Like, I think, if it wasn't for a certain little bias among purists. In the sporting world, like, that would be acknowledged as one of the greatest calls of all time, and I think it already is.
Probably the greatest, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even when a soccer game is 6-1, they'll have Jim Ross go, well, somebody stop the damn match, It's just become part of pop culture,
yeah.
And and the match has as well. So it's hard to imagine that match with a different call. It just would not have been the same.
Now, that second bump, obviously, that one kind of took you guys by surprise, and the cage broke away, in case some of our listeners don't know.
Yeah, the bottom fell out on us, literally, the top fell out on us.
Yeah, and you went through the top, slammed the mat, chair hit you, knocked your tooth through your nose. How long were you actually out? When do you remember regaining consciousness?
Yeah, I think it was 42 seconds that I was unconscious, and that to me is like it's kind of the irony of professional wrestling, that's considered like, it's the fake sport and all that. Like, I'll grant you, certain things about it, but tell me one of your real sports that continues when one of the participants is no longer conscious.
Right.
You don't take a time out. You try to buy time. And, of course, that would not be the case now. We've learned so much about concussions that match would have been called, at that moment. Boom, done. But the fact that we continued is kind of what added to its allure.
And I'm just amazed by it at the end of it, though, just how you're able not only to finish with the thumbtacks and everything, but my little part that maybe a lot of mainstream fans don't realize is after he hits the tombstone on you, you do a little mini kick out, like you're still just trying to get out. You know what I mean? Like it's those little things that tell the story.
Kicked my right leg. I was still trying. Yeah, and I mean, legend has it the fans gave me a standing ovation afterwards. I would go back. It was a smattering of polite applause. It seemed to just grow in the days and weeks and months and years, and at this point even decades, to the point where it's just amazing. There was the internet was kind of in its infancy. Nobody was texting or tweeting links to each other. So it kind of took a while to grow in stature. And so now I do appearances, and it's just stunning to me that about 50% of the people who talked to me about that match weren't even alive when it took place.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so after that match, I mean, you'd already put in your time and years in the business, but after that and all those hellacious bumps, I mean, you were on track to win the title. But it happened later in that December on Raw. Take me into that night. I know it was you and Rock. You had DX and the corporation, all that out there. And everyone talks about that huge Austin pop when he comes out to, lay the Rock out with the chair. But at the same time, don't you think it was so many of the fans were finally happy to see you win it? I think that's part of the eruption, A, Stone Cold's coming out, but B, this means Foley might finally do it.
You're trying to put a very polite twist on the fact that
trying to give you credit, man.
Reaction of the night there. And there's no better way than to make a surprise entrance than by having your entrance music hit, I'm going to come out, hit my music. It didn't seem to matter. Those details didn't seem to matter. It was enormous. Yeah, I think there was the realization, this might really happen. Vince McMahon had really stacked the deck against me. The Rock was his guy. Ring was surrounded. It was a lumberjack match. DX had kind of taken me under their wing as kind of an unofficial member. And it was just like all the stars were in alignment that day. And, I did. I won with Steve's help, and the response was just, it was incredible. And then everything that happened after the 3 count was all ad lib.
Michael Cole and sleeping on the floors of Motel 6s.
Michael Cole gave a great call.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the underrated things, and he worked really hard on it, and he was he was as big a part of that night as JR was of. Well, all right, okay, maybe not quite as big. It's almost sacrilege.
Right.
But Michael was great on that call, and it was something he was really proud of, and I was really happy to have him there for it.
Absolutely. Talk about how that sort of turned the tide in the Monday Night Wars. I know I've seen you do interviews before where the WCW announcer said, because you guys were pre-taping Raw at that point, and he said that'll really put butts in the seats, and it really did. It kind of backfired, and you guys won the
backfired big time on them, and it's nice that Eric Bischoff and Tony Schiavone will admit, okay, we may have misfired on that one. Actually, I was just on a show with Eric a couple nights ago, and they were like, just you guys are going to be in the ring together, just kind of come up with a little something. So I made like I was going to make a big promo. Let me tell you something, Bischoff. When you gave away the announcement, and you whispered in Schiavone's ear that Mick Foley was winning the title, and told him to say that, put a lot of butts in seats. There's something I've been wanting to say to you for a long time, and it's about time I got it off my chest. They got right in his face, and they went, "Thank you."
Pretty much.
That made me a bigger star overnight, So without those guys giving away the finish, there's no 500,000 fans simultaneously flipping channels. And the strange thing is, I just talked about the ad lib, the stuff after the match. Right after the win, there was a huge exodus to WCW because they had that huge main event at the Georgia Dome live. So they had something people wanted to see.
Right.
It's just that Schiavone and Tony and Eric kind of let people know that there might be something they'd like to see even more.
Absolutely.
And on the other channel, it was a big night for us.
Absolutely. And of course, your opponent that night, you guys launch into a feud, you and The Rock, a feud that became a friendship. But everyone remembers, obviously the I Quit match and all those chair shots. But I mean, people forget that even before you won the title, there was the Survivor Series screw job. You kind of recreated the Brett Shawn thing with when he became the corporate champ. And you did the Super Bowl empty arena. You did the St. Valentine's Day Massacre where you both knocked each other out simultaneously like Rocky II. I remember it all.
It was the Rocky II finish. Yeah, we did November, December, January, February, and then Mania, 5 straight pay-per-views. And then we went on, 8 months later, whatever it was, to team up and, and really create some good memories for people.
I think that Rock and Sock thing was still one of the most watched Raws ever, right? Which is so crazy because it's so outside the norm. How did you guys think, like, hey, go with us on this? That this is your life thing?
Well, I mean, credit goes to Vince Russo, actually, for coming up with the idea. But he knew that here's the basic structure, and then you guys have fun. And I remember they had the actors, local actors in North Carolina, like they're ready to run lines. Like, okay, what do you want to do? And I brought Dwayne over, and I went, I'll say something, and Rock will come out and say something, and then I'll call you out. I'll say something, and one of them looked at us and said, "Is this how you do it?" And Rock was like, "Yeah, that's how we do it." So, it turned out we went like 14 extra minutes on live prime time, TV. Mr. McMahon was seething that like a 12 or 14 minute segment went 26 or 28, and he thought it was an awful segment. But again, this is back in the days before Twitter and even texting. So the only thing we could figure out is that fans had to actually be calling their friends and going, "You have to watch." You have to watch WWE. There was no other way to make, to account for the huge increase in viewership.
What made working with The Rock so great? You guys were, I mean, I've heard him talk in hindsight, and even I think there was some like 4-way tag match that you thought he wouldn't only come back for a big occasion, and the fact that he thought of you in that light.
Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, I knew that we'd had great matches together. I knew that we'd had great chemistry, and then made people really. I get this comment from time to time, and it's just. It's beyond flattering when someone will go out of their way and go, like, I want you to know I was going through a really tough time. And they'll point to that pairing more than anything else as something that cheered them up, brought them around, gave them something to look forward to. But neither of us knew that what we were doing was anything special. Like, we talked about that years later. And I just, I don't know. I never thought The Rock considered me to be on the level of some of those other opponents he had. And so when I got the call asking if I would, what I thought about teaming up with The Rock in 2004, I said, well, that sounds great, but I'd seen it in writing. It said he would only come back for something big.
Right.
I said, that sounds great to me, but I was told he would only come back for something big. And Brian Gewirtz, who now runs The Rock's production company, was like, yeah, Rock thinks this is big. And he does, and then I would see things, in interviews he did later on, and on his own DVD that WWE did, where he talked so highly of me, and I didn't know it at the time, so it was really nice, especially given how we might be talking about the next president of the United States that he has a good, thinks of me pretty highly.
That's got to feel great. I need to know about Mr. Sacco because you've been doing Mandible Claw for a while, and it's a fascinating move, unique move in itself. But when did you get the idea? I know it was during the Austin McMahon bedpan segment, which was hysterical. But when did you get the idea of, hey, I'm going to take the Mandible Claw and put a sock over it?
Most fans just think, hey, yeah, that's a disgusting sock that he puts in people's mouths, but it had been a nerve hold used as a finisher for 2 years at that point, so there was some history. And we didn't know when I did the sock it was going to lead to anything beyond that day. So when Vince Russo came up to me the next night in Detroit, he's like, bro, you got the sock? I was like, I don't know. It turned out he's in my bag. They're chanting for him. They got signs for him. Bro, you got the sock, as if I couldn't just draw another one, and we were on to something. So I think it was like the second night after that, I just thought, hey, I'm a guy known for, this claw hold. Apparently people like me, with a sock puppet, and we put the two together. It was like the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup of wrestling finishing holds.
Did you ever reuse the same sock, or did you do a new one each week, or how?
Well, the first few weeks it was the same sock, and then with the exception of Al Snow, I was quickly becoming the least popular guy in the dressing room. As long as Al was there, that first spot was kind of secure. But then I just realized, not only is it proper respect, to your opponents to have a clean sock, but it kind of gave me something to do after the match. You'd throw the thing in the crowd, and people would dive for it like it was seventh
the
World
Holy
Series
Grail.
home run. Yeah,
that's so great. Well, we kind of talked about you and Taker and you and Rock, but there's one other program an ongoing feud that I thought was arguably one of your best, and that was, of course, with Triple H. You convert back to Cactus Jack for that street fight at the Rumble, and then, of course, what was at the time thought to be your retirement match, the Hell in the Cell there at No Way Out.
Yeah.
What was it?
Yeah.
What was that street fight like? Because you guys brought out the barbed wire, the tacks. What did Triple H's rivalry mean to your career? Where does that sort of rank?
Yeah, it was really big for both of us because I had been really banged up, before I was almost immobile. My knees were so bad. And then Triple H had great success with DX, but this was like his, time to prove that he belonged at the top of the card as a singles wrestler. So it gave me a chance to go out the way that I wanted to go out, and gave Triple H a chance to prove that he could be that, that he could, carry the company on his shoulders. And so that's when things are working best, when both people come out ahead. So we had those two, kind of legendary matches, and both of us look back on it like as if, not as if, we look back on it as one of the best rivalries we were involved with.
Absolutely. And speaking of how you sort of went to Cactus Jack, you obviously did the Three Faces of Foley. What inspired you to kind of go back and forth between Cactus Jack, Mankind, Dude Love, and Mankind always sort of had a screw loose anyway, so it kind of made sense that you do the split personality thing, I guess.
Well, a lot of credit goes to Mr. McMahon, and the truth is, if Mr. McMahon thought I looked like a star going in and didn't think I looked sleazy, then I would have come in as Cactus Jack, and there never would have been an evolution of characters. But because he thought that covering up my face would be my only way into the company, and then later realized I had an interesting backstory, not only as Cactus Jack, but that I'd had this character, Dude Love, as a teenager. He really thought it would be that fans would love that journey. And I remember him giving me a phone call like 8 a.m. Very thoughtful of him. It's 8 a.m. on a weekend, like, "Hey, pal, how'd you like to be Dude Love?" And he liked seeing my dreams come true, and fans enjoyed it. So it was fun, and I get triple the royalties on action figures, so it worked out pretty good in the long run.
That's awesome. I know we're coming up against the clock, so final couple questions. But you mentioned your early days, and where you had that character. I remember seeing videos of you jumping off garages, doing the snooka splash that I think you hitchhiked to Madison Square Garden, right?
Yeah, I did. I sure did.
Yeah. So I bring all this up because I remember reading your memoirs. I think you, if not the first, one of the first, and this was before the internet, but it was sort of that groundbreaking behind-the-scenes look, and you published several memoirs, and I just remember page-turning, flipping that thing, and just talk about sort of how influential you think those books were, and peeling the curtain back before the internet took off.
Yeah. And there was some concern about how honest I was in the book, and my thought was always, people are going to respect wrestling and WWE more when they're finished than they do when they begin, and I think that was almost universally the case. I respected people's intelligence. I didn't try to portray wrestling as something it wasn't, and I knew that the facts were often, usually, stranger than fiction. So, hey, we didn't know what we had on our hands. I wrote it in 50 days in longhand, almost 200,000 words, and it just turned out I had a conversational style that people liked, and kind of opened the floodgates for wrestling books. So I guess in a sense, I can both take credit for some of the success and be the guy to blame for some of the bad ones. But I think another alarming thing, in a good way, is that so many wrestlers then realize, hey, I can actually write my own book. And
Right.
I'm not knocking football, basketball, baseball, but I think it'd be very rare. At the time it was thought to be just ludicrous that any athlete or performer would write their own book.
Right.
It's usually as told to or just done with a ghostwriter who does all the writing,
Sure.
100% of the writing. And in some cases, the actor, athlete, performer has very little to do with what actually comes out. So it was seen as being really strange, but there's got to be at least 10 wrestling books that have been actually written almost 100% with the help of an editor, of course, otherwise my punctuation. yeah. And then I fell in love with the semicolon to the point where the editor actually knew, all right, just leave some of Mick's semicolons, even if they're not used correctly. He just likes seeing them out there.
That's his signature.
In one sense, it inspired people to go after their dreams. It inspired some of the other wrestlers to write their own books, and in my case, it opened up doors for me to try different things. And even though I've failed at far more things than I've succeeded in, a couple big successes goes a long way, and everything will be done with passion and a firm belief in what I'm doing.
Well, before you go, could you give us a cheap pop of what you might sound like here in Washington, D.C.?
Hey, it's great to be right here in Washington, D.C.
Mick Foley. So I can't think of a better way to close it than just saying, have a nice day.
Have a nice day.
Thank you, sir.
All right, have a nice day. Thanks.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.